If you're a regular viewer of my stuff, well, thanks. Thanks, man. That's really cool. Appreciate that. But you might also remember a few weeks ago when I played an early demo for the game SCHiM. At that time, I was really jazzed about it. I said that it controlled well, looks cool, has some nice iterative approach to the level design, and I was excited to see where it was going to go next for the full thing. Well, I have now played the full thing, all 65 levels. The full game comes out tomorrow, July 18th, to Switch, PlayStation, and Steam, and I don't really like it. But let's start with the positive. I think that a lot of the stuff that I got from the demo is still here. The game looks very, very cool. It's got a very unique art style, and I love the approach that you can change the colors at any time to suit your specific color needs. I still think it controls really well. Moving around as a little frog is definitely the highlight. A little shadow frog, a little SCHiM who belongs in the shadow puddles. At no point in the game did I ever feel like it was impossible to jump to the puddle I wanted to jump to. Like, even when it's a really thin, small puddle, it controls beautifully, which is a tricky thing to pull off at an isometric angle for a 3D platformer. So big kudos there, well done. And I still think that there are plenty of instances where the game takes that puddle jumping mechanic and does some neat stuff with it. You have to move some crossing guards so that their shadow is at a different angle on the road so that you can take it across to the next puddle you need to get to. You can control a forklift to move a shadow higher, hitch a ride in a bird's shadow that's going across somewhere. There's some really neat little flourishes and stuff like that. One of my favorites is at nighttime in a specific level where a car is passing and you have to hurry and time your jumps through the puddles as the car's headlights are making shadows. It's neat. The big problem is that these neat moments are spaced out way too far from one another. The game has 65 levels, but an unhealthy amount of those levels are just hopping through puddles for like less than 30 seconds. And it'll be like, bing, that was a whole level. But all you did was go from puddle to puddle to puddle with no mechanic, not anything interesting going on. And then you go into the next level. And even those big levels that have one or two of the really cool mechanics, they're there and then they're gone. To be fair, that is a very healthy approach for level design, to introduce a mechanic and then get rid of it. But you should also let the player have enough time to use that mechanic and have some fun out of it and squeeze all the fun out of it that you can before you toss it aside. I feel like it shows a fun mechanic and then it's gone. I feel like too often in SCHiM, the levels will show a fun mechanic and then it's immediately gone and you forget about it and it comes back up maybe in the future, maybe not. And even if it does come back in the future, again, it'll be like a little glimmer. You don't really have any time to actually ingest or enjoy all of the fun puddle hopping mechanics. And again, this just comes down to pacing. One of the other pacing issues with the game is that every single level begins and ends with wrestling the camera away from you. I understand why they do that, though. The whole game is centered around your little SCHiM that you control being separated from its human. So you're trying to get back to him to be part of his shadow again. And at the beginning of every level, you see where your human is and where you've got to go. One of the problems with that, though, is that every time it shows your human, it shows you a really lengthy, way too long camera pan back to where you are, and it's always this jittery, blurry, out of focus, fuzzy, unpleasant to look at thing. At any time you want while playing the game, you can just hold a button to show where your objective is, and that's way more preferable to just doing that than having the eye-melting mush at the beginning of each level, where you have no control of the camera at all. And then when you end every single level, camera control is wrestled away from you, and you're just shifted to the next thing. I know that sounds like a nitpicky thing, and it's also like, well, of course control is taken away from you when the level changes. But it does it so abruptly. Music, color, tone, everything between each level changes like this. And you have no time to really focus on or ingest anything that's happening. The game feels like it's rushing you from level to level to level. It also feels like the levels can be too padded. They can have not enough stuff in them. They can be just mindless puddle jumping for forever. They can be introduce one mechanic, throw you around, or have you just jump, and then it decides it's done and you're on to the next one, and the next one is only 2 jumps, and the next one is only 3 jumps, and the next one is 85 jumps with one mechanic thrown in. It just has a whole bunch of inconsistency in how you play the game. To be fair, a lot of people might not want much more than a nice little relaxing game. And SCHiM is totally that. If you just want to jump around in a game that feels good to control with some pleasant music in the background, SCHiM can totally do that for you. But I feel like part of the flow state that could come from just puddle jumping is taken away with how often the camera wrestles control away from you. I feel like if SCHiM wanted to be entirely cozy, it would just be longer strings of levels where you're simply jumping from one puddle to another without constantly interrupting the player for more of a seamless experience. If you're going to be interrupting the player all the time like this, I feel like the levels should have more mechanically interesting things in them to present more of a challenge. Not an Elden Ring level challenge, just some nice puzzles, something to solve, something to overcome, instead of just, here's one little mechanic thrown at you where you bounce on a clothesline. That's all you're getting for this level. Have fun. And I feel bad saying all of this because SCHiM definitely has a lot of heart put into it. One of the coolest things is that no matter what shadow you jump into, you can interact with the object that you've jumped into the shadow of, and there's a very cool custom little interaction for it. It might wobble, it might be a garbage can and spits out a whole bunch of litter, and the litter just stays there and you can make a little mess like a little trash goblin, which I often did. Or it might be a car that honks and makes passersby go, oh my gosh. Or you might jump in a human's shadow and make them sneeze. A whole bunch of custom interactions that have a lot of heart and attention and detail put into it. Which extends to the game's sound design as well. When you jump into a grocery cart, it makes a perfect little grocery cart jingle. Jump onto a bike, you can hear all of the metal of the bike jostle together as you jump into its shadow, and you can ring its little bell. The sound design and the detail to the little worlds are very nice. On the other hand, in the little worlds, all of the people move so strangely. There's an overarching story that follows the person that you're trying to get back to the shadow of, and it's a wordless story, which, to be fair, I love wordless stories, but to do a wordless story well, you've got to do it really well, and the wordless story going on here is very uninteresting. There's not anything to latch onto, and it's only made worse by how wildly the humans animate in this game. They gesture in really weird ways. It feels like I'm watching a high school theater production where everyone is overacting and over-gesturing to a weird degree, which only works when they're really far away on a stage, not when it's on a screen that's right next to my face. Like at this point, you get this bicycle from this lady who I'm assuming is a relative of the guy, and look at her wave right there. Holy crap, woman, he's 2 feet away from you. He's not on a boat. That sounds really nitpicky, but it pulls me right out of any moment I could possibly get immersed in the story or sympathize with what's going on when the characters are acting like weird little wacky inflatable flailing arm flailing tube men. I don't want to come down on SCHiM really hard because I think there's a lot of heart here. It's not buggy. It's not frustrating to play in the sense that it's hard to play or there's anything skiwampus with the controls, but it is frustrating in the sense that I wish it could be a whole lot more than what it is. Because the little world that they've presented of these little SCHiMs that live in shadows is charming and it has potential, but it doesn't feel like it capitalizes on any of that. And it also feels like the game is wasting its unique 3D platforming potential, because hopping from shadow to shadow, that's cool, but it doesn't iterate on it enough throughout the levels, and the levels are so unevenly paced and so unevenly made. Some are just way too short, and to be honest, 65 levels of wildly varying quality, it doesn't feel like the game is worth $25. If you're super interested in it, I'd recommend picking it up on a sale, but SCHiM gets an arcade grade of C.